What if your struggles can lead to a new life? I left California with just $700 of passive income, turned my pain into purpose, and built a new life abroad. Let me share how you can do the same and start living the life of your dreams. I want to welcome you back to my channel with Grow with Tahira, and I empower women to turn their pain into purpose and profit while thriving in life. I want to share with you a bit about my background and how I was led here and living a life in Senegal, happily married in a beautiful union. So first, I was married for 7.5 years in California with the love of my life before he passed away. He fell ill in 2019. He had a very lengthy health issue. And fast forward, he passed away in July of 2020, and may God rest his soul and grant him paradise. I mean, so after my late husband's passing, I had to close out his estate, which meant a 2-year probate battle. And that's another story. So after I won the battle in 2022, I paid off some debt, and then I purchased my plane ticket to Morocco. So this was the shift. When I went to Morocco, there was a spark of life that came. There was an inner calling that occurred. I first went to visit my father because my father lives in Morocco with my stepmom and siblings, and this is my first time out of the country in my adult years. So when I went, there was it was a calling for me to travel outside of California. You see, when my late husband passed away, I didn't have a desire to leave California. I wanted to stay because I just didn't have another destination that appealed to me. I always said to myself, if I were to ever leave the state of California, I would more than likely leave the country. So I couldn't, there was no other state in the United States that appealed to me. So when I knew it was that time for me to leave, and when I went to Morocco, it was just something that was so miraculous that occurred, being in another country, hearing the music, smelling the spices in the air, and just experiencing the people and the culture. It was inspiration. It showed me that everything that I was striving for while I was in California, it's coming to a full circle. And it's coming and it's showing me what life is like outside of my normal environment. So when I was in Morocco, I experienced just a new shift, a new awakening. And then I returned upon the United States. And being in the United States, I began to downsize. I gave away some things and I sold some things, and I stored some of my items that I was not ready to part from in storage. So with that, I began to do a lot of research. I researched a lot of YouTubers who live life abroad, and it gave me some tips that I'm going to share with you, what I learned, some practical tips that I learned from my research and also firsthand experience. So with a limited income after losing my job, I decided that I could live off of $700 or less a month while traveling between Morocco, United States, and Senegal for almost 1.5 years until I settled here in Senegal. So I want to share with you some tips that you can use in preparing to leave the country, because I have so many people asking me, how is life in another country? How do you make your income? What do you need? What do I need to do to prepare? Or I hear people saying that they want to leave, but they're just not ready yet. So there's a lot of conversations around how to prepare to leave the country. So I'm going to share with you some of my practical tips and see if it resonates with you, okay? So the first thing is 8 tips. So the first thing is to make a decision. If you are ready for a change and have a desire to leave the country, make the decision. Once you make the decision, your actions will follow in place. Like once I knew that I was leaving the state of California, that was my decision. I made my decision, and then I began to do what? I began to downsize. I began to sell some items. I began to store certain items, and I began to give away certain items. So it all begins with that decision. Once you make that decision, now the actions begin to fall in place, right? So you make your decision. As I did, I began to downsize. That was the practical step that I took once I made my decision. Also, I did research, and I would say do research. I watched travel bloggers on YouTube for inspiration. I mean, I was glued on YouTube, and I definitely watched the Lost Academy. That was a channel that inspired me. I think it's Law LeBlanc that inspired me to see how you can just explore the world and see a whole different reality, different cultures that's different than what I was used to in the United States. And I wanted more. I always had a desire to travel the world, but I worked my job, and I guess I never really believed that it could happen, really, just really that simple. I never believed that it could happen, although I had a deep desire for it. So what I did was I did my research, and I also found that those who I researched was living abroad for very little. They did not have, you did not have to have a lot of money to leave the country. So that was something that really opened my mind and broadened my view on this. Like, you can actually leave the country and not have thousands of dollars. So that was something that I learned also. And you can also have freedom, independence outside of your conventional 9 to 5 grind. Tip 3, join a supportive community. For me, this was the game changer. So I was a part of Titan Transformation. This is a wellness weight loss program. And the founder he's an American, but he lives in Thailand. He's living in Thailand for several years. And in the community, we all meet once a week on a Zoom, and we talk about our goals and our weight loss goals, and what we're battling against, what we're striving towards. And I share with the community that I'm actually considering leaving the country, but I'm scared and I was scared. So I'm scared because I don't want to give up my apartment. Like, this is all that I know. You know, my apartment was my safe space. Think about when we all had to shelter in place during COVID. And for those of us who was fortunate and blessed to have a home, like, that home nurtured me, that home helped to heal me. And that was part of my healing journey. So I was very attached to my home. I was attached to my bed frame, a beautiful iron bed frame. I was attached to my mattress. Like, I was attached to certain items in my home that meant something to me. That may sound crazy to you, but to me, it meant something. So I was afraid to take the leap. Although I made the decision to leave, I was still afraid. And I spoke with the community, and they shared with me, like, the worst thing that can happen is that I come back to California and I get a new apartment. And the worst thing that can happen is I find another mattress and another bed frame. But I laugh at it now because I look at it, it's like, okay, I can see the human, the silliness in it. But at the time, it was a big chasm for me to leap over. I was afraid. So the community supported me by letting me know that it's not scary on the other side. And what's the worst that can happen? You come back to the state of California. So find yourself a supportive community, whether it's a large group of people or you have, like, those close-knit friends who are always your cheerleaders and who are always supporting you in your ideas and your visions and your goals. That is something that definitely is beneficial to me. Another thing that you must do to prepare to leave the country, you have to get your passport. Tip 4, get your passport. You cannot leave the country without a passport. And if you want to leave the country and you don't have a passport, then that's wishful thinking. And everything starts with the dream. So it's important to visualize and to dream, but it's equally more important to make sure you're taking practical steps that can lead you into that manifestation of what it is that you want. So get a passport. I know you can go to the US Postal Service for a passport. You can also Google passport application, okay? And it does not cost to fill out the application. You can actually fill out the application for free, but you do have to pay for your passport. So I would recommend you go to your local US Postal Office, your local US Postal Office, and get an application and begin that process. And then go there to submit your application, and they'll take you through all the steps. But the most important step is the first start of that is get your passport. And also, I didn't put this as a tip, I'm going to add this as a bonus tip, okay? Another bonus tip, what you want to do in preparation of leaving the country is definitely book your ticket. Book your plane ticket, because once I booked my plane ticket to Morocco, it was no longer wanting to do it, hoping to do it, wishing to do it. It was happening. Then that's the part of that decision making. When you take those actions towards a decision, it begins to move you, it's moving you in direction that you desire, okay? So tip number 5, research your destination. Make sure you understand the language and the culture. and to connect and also make connections with people who are on ground. Like for myself, I'm not a solo traveler. I think solo traveler is like the bomb. I give it up to all of my solo travelers and those who are aspiring solo travelers, like do you. But for myself, I like to travel with someone or know that I have people on the grounds, meaning in the country that I can connect with, because for me, that just makes me feel secure. And that's just part of like my upbringing as a Muslim woman. We always think about security and safety first. So that's something that makes me feel comfortable as a Muslim woman traveling, making sure that I have people on the grounds who can welcome me. So my family was there when I got to Morocco. So although I didn't understand the language, I didn't understand the language then, but I learned how to speak Moroccan Arabic, which is called Darija. And I think I need to brush up on some of my stuff, like Enda la bes, Kedera le bes. And Kedera la bes means how are you and your family? La bes, Enda la bes. So, you know, I still have some of that in me. So with that, researching. So if you know that you're going to travel alone, just understand the environment, understand the climate, understand the political climate, understand the safety. Is it safe for foreigners? Is it safe for Americans? Because in some countries, Americans are targets. So you want to make sure you're doing your research and know what to expect when you go to this country, and most importantly, how to conduct yourself when you enter into a new country, because not all laws are the same as American laws, okay? We're going to go to tip number 6. Tip number 6 is know the practicalities. Kind of ties into doing your research, like do your research on the political climate, the safety, the cost of living. And I know a lot of many African countries are uber affordable to live in. Like that average household income in Morocco to survive is like $600 US. So you can do a lot in Morocco with very little. And again, I went there for 2 weeks, and then I went back and I stayed for 2.5 months. And I went back and I stayed for another month. So I was traveling back and forth in Morocco, and you can get far with little in Morocco. Tip number 7. Okay, we have one more tip after this. Tip number 7. Downsize your belongings. As I mentioned this in the beginning, like when you're planning to leave the country, you will, depending on your budget, it is not practical to take all of your items with you. You are able to ship some certain items, and you can ship your belongings in barrels. Like that's what I did when I settled in Senegal. I shipped my personal items to Senegal and more of the items that I purchased. And that's something I can speak about in a future video. But if you are looking to downsize, you want to begin to see what you need, what you don't need, by sorting them out. And I did a video on this in a previous video on this in more details. Like, know what you want to keep, identify what you want to sell, and identify what you want to give away, meaning like donate, and what's trash. So what I did was I actually went to a consignment shop, or I contacted a consignment shop, and I gave my items to a consignment shop. And what they do is they bring your items, they see if your items are of a good quality and in good condition to put on a display floor. And once they approve that your furniture can be sold in their store, they'll have someone come pick it up. I think I paid $200 for the pickup at the time, and they picked up my bed frame, my furniture, and they listed the items that they would sell it for. And it was a percentage that I would receive from the purchase of the items. And that's exactly what happened. And I believe, I don't remember the details, it was like almost three years ago. I believe they mailed me a check. When they sold the items, I think the check was cut every 2 weeks or once a month. I'm not quite sure of the cadence of the check, but I know that I received my money in mail. And I also held on to a UPS store postal box. Because when I had my UPS box that I used when I left the country the first time, I realized like UPS did not have an efficient system in place for the mailing to come to the postal office to be forwarded to my address in New York. That's a long story. I had my postal to concise it up. When I went out of the country, I used UPS postal to forward my mail from California to New York, which is my second home base. And I'm paid, I think, $119 for that. And I never received any mail for like 4 weeks. Come to find out, they didn't effectively execute the forwarding process. So I'm happy I learned that in a short period of time while I was out of the country. So when I left the country again, I used the UPS postal store. It's a bit more expensive. I'd rather pay more for efficiency and effectiveness than pay less and don't get what I'm paying for. So that's something that I did. So I kind of diverted from the downsizing process. So yeah, I went through, so the check was mailed to my UPS store in postal box. The UPS store postal box, it was forwarded to New York, and that's how I was able to deposit my check. Long story short, I identify what you want to sell, identify what you want to keep, and identify what you want to give away, identify what is just trash. And if you have items that they're bulky items that you can't travel abroad with, then you want to put those into storage. So that's something that I did. I put my personal items that I knew that I wanted or I was never able to part from, and I put them in storage. And then when I came back, that's when I began to downsize even more. And then last point, which is a point that you should be aware about, is financially planning. So some of you may have a side hustle or work remote. This is ideal when moving abroad, but just make sure if you're working remote that your job does not require you to go in person for site visits or meetings, because if that's the case, then that can thwart your plan and moving out of the country. I know I lived off of a passive income of actually like a little under $700 while I was traveling to Morocco and Senegal. And I also did contract work. Like I had my business Hearts Connecting and I was not actively promoting Hearts Connecting, which is a virtual funeral memorial facilitation service. But I did have some business come in, like it was dripping in, it was not a floodgate at this point of my entrepreneur journey. And I also did like contract work. I facilitated and co-facilitated virtual events. So that kept more income coming in. But the passive income was the thing that was my anchor. So there you have it. Like these are steps that you can take to prepare to live your life abroad with very little. You do not need a lot of money to live outside of the country. Okay, now if you want a certain lifestyle and living a life of luxury, then yeah, you might be doing a little bit more thousands, but you don't need a couple of or several thousands to make that transition from the US to another country, to live and just enjoy just smelling the roses. And that's what this experience did for me leading after my late husband's passing. Like it allowed me to just exhale, because going through the illness and the probate battles and building a business while I'm in the depth of my grieving process, I didn't have time to exhale. I was on fight and battle mode. So when I left the country, I finally just said, I don't want any responsibilities. I just want to be. And that's what I did for almost 3 years, right? So if you're ready to stop waiting and start living a purpose abroad, leave a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking. Where do you want to go? Let me know, and we can work with you to help you get there. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that we can begin this transformation journey together. Peace and love.